Morning all, the Scrutiny Committee meeting will be conducted on a hybrid basis in accordance with the Local Government Elections Wales Act 2021, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders. Council standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. The recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request, and the images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the council. Okay, shall we start with apologies, please?
No apologies, Chair.
No apologies. Okay, any declarations of interest from members? The meetings of the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 6. We start on page 3. Four. Five. Page 6. Okay, so we can go through that. Have a second, thank you. Item number 4 then, service area mid-year report, social services, children.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you, Chair.
thank you.
Yeah, so this is, as you said, this is the mid-year review for children's services. The overview report in the pack, which no doubt we'll have time to have a look at. I have Natalie Collier, the head of children's services, with me this morning, and Natalie's just going to very briefly give you an overview of the report, and then I've no doubt that members will have questions to go into more detail. So over to Natalie.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. So the last 6 months have seen a number of successes within children's services. Despite some financial challenges, we've managed to register an additional 3-bedded residential provision for young people, and also we're in the process of registering 2 further settings, including a 6-bed home for children with disabilities and a 6-bed home for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. There have been some delays in terms of the development of a care leaver provision, and that was linked to planning. However, we're looking to open that in early 2025. We've recruited to Newport's first ever dedicated parent and child foster carer role, which enables to support families and the care of their babies within a local community rather than being moved away to larger residential settings. The children looked after figures have continued to reduce, and up until recently they were at the lowest. We've also been producing a community parenting strategy, which is soon to be launched, and that is in co-production with our care experienced young people. We have continued to utilise the radical reform funding to transform services such as our Kutch Centre, which is the offer to families that have to have are required to have supervised contact with their children. This is much more of a family focused and realistic environment for them to be spending time with each other in. The youth service has continued to successfully deliver the turnaround offer from the Ministry of Justice and is delivering an early help and assessment intervention offer for young people and families. Furthermore, they achieved a good rating from the HMIP inspection, although that was in March. Actually, the report wasn't produced until later in the summer. The contextual safeguarding offer continues to be embedded and sits under the governance of Safer Newport and the Safer Places subgroup. We have remodelled our business support team across adults and children to ensure that the greater efficiency across the 2 service areas. Although there has been a number of achievements over the last 6 months, we we still have the pressure in including some staffing vacancies and demand on services. The level of trauma and deprivations that families find themselves in within the city continues to increase. And there's also some uncertainty in terms of some of the provisions being sustainable due to them being grant funded. The implementation of the Eliminate Profit policy change has placed increased financial pressures on service areas. Private providers are exiting the market, and those that remain are increasing costs of packages of care, which at the moment we don't have control of at this time. This requires from Welsh Government significant financial investment in respect of both capital and revenue. The social services client database, we've just commissioned a new database, and that needs to go live in 2026. And that will be a huge transition for all of social services who will need to kind of move across to that new client database. Despite all of that, though, the priority of staff continues to be striving to deliver quality of services to the most vulnerable families within the city. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Councillor Cleverly, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. Well, my first question was about an update on the children's homes, but I think you've already given that. On the Bridge View, it said it's going to be finished by 25. Any more news on that?
Yeah, so we've currently acquired Bridgeview, and it's currently going through registration as we speak. So what we're hoping is that we'll be able to transition some children in the new year into that care home.
Thank you for that. And my second question is the support for social workers, because we noticed there is a big high turnover of staff in the homes and wherever. What support and training is provided for them?
We've got a workforce development team that can support in terms of delivering appropriate training. We're also one of 4 local authorities in Gwent that are going to be merging as one workforce development team, so we can utilise each other's resources and learn from experience. We also offer clinical supervision to our social workers. So in order, they have their 4 weekly supervision, line manager supervision, but when there are particularly challenging cases, there's the offer of clinical supervision for our practitioners.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, thanks, Councillor Kelly. I just want to add to that as well. We work very closely with our colleagues in the Health and Safety Department, so they're very visible within the teams and making sure that they offer their expertise to the teams who are, as you know, will deal with quite difficult situations.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davis, do you have any questions? Councillor Jenkins, I can't see. Councillor Jenkins, sorry, do you have any questions?
It was just the one question. It was just, I noticed there was a loss of 50 staff, and I was just wondering what were the main reasons that we lose staff?
Yeah, so in terms of the overall staffing in children's services, is that what you mean, Councillor Jenkins?
Yes, it was just the head count, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so in terms of that, we've seen a reduction because Deirdre SV has then moved over to prevention and inclusion. So that service area has moved to another service area.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Watkins.
The new 3-bed children's home which you have,
That's up and running now.
It's not up and running at the moment. We've got we've got the bridge view, which is going through registration. We have we've got the additional
We're still in the process of acquiring.
yeah. So we're looking. So there's a property that we're looking to acquire, and we put in an offer. So we're waiting capital funding for that property.
Next question follows on from that. How many properties do we have?
I'll just go through that for you now. So
Will we be looking to acquire more?
Yeah, so essentially we currently have 5 long-term children's homes that can provide care for up to 20 children. We have 2 new homes in progress, which will increase our capacity by 11 beds. We currently have 24 children placed in private children's home, with the majority of these being outside of Newport. 24 they're placed in private provisions.
So how many children do we have in-house?
So in-house, we're at capacity, so we have 20 children. In terms of the question around our proposal to open further homes, we've concluded through our analysis that we need to open a further 5 homes over the next 4 years, raising our capacity by another 17 in order to meet the need. We're in the process at the moment of seeking capital funding from Welsh Government to assist us in acquiring those properties. We've also given indicative numbers in terms of what revenue costs that we will require from Welsh Government as well, in order that we can implement the policy change by 2027.
24 children which we have outside in private. How many of those could we accommodate if we had the homes to do it? Because obviously some courts say they're not to be in a local area, they've got to be out of the area. So how many of those 24 can actually be located within the development?
We will be looking to bring all of our children back. The courts cannot enforce us to place children outside. The only occasions where children may possibly be in a situation where they have to reside outside of the city is if they require secure provision. Yeah. And there's a local secure provision which is down in Neath Port Talbot hillside, that some of our children have resided in previously.
So if we are successful in getting extra accommodation for children within city boundaries, how are we going to manage to increase the amount of staff to make that economically viable, shall we say?
That's all part of our business plan. So we've completed and then we've worked with our finance colleagues. We've looked at if we were to open an additional 5 homes, what would that look like in terms of capital funding and revenue funding? And the ask has gone to Welsh Government in terms of, in order for local authorities in Wales to implement the policy change, then there needs to be additional funds in order to allow us to do that. The other local authorities across Wales have also done the same, or been requested to do the same. I must say that in Newport we are way ahead of the game in terms of developing our provision. I think we've probably got the largest portfolio of in-house residential provision than any other local authority in Wales at the moment.
Do you envision any problems in regards to recruiting staff? when that comes about?
There may well be challenges because I suppose we're, if you like, all fishing in from the same pond, because we're all within the same provision. I'd like to say that you know, that Newport has a good offer because we've got a lot of experience, and I suppose the support that the residential staff would be receiving would be from a far greater and more experienced management team, because we've been managing residential homes for a significant period of time. So I'd like to think that the Newport offer is potentially stronger than other local authorities.
One last question, Chair, and that is in regards to, do we have a training programme for new staff coming in, or staff wanting to come into the NCC?
Absolutely. There's a clear training programme for all of our new residential staff that come in, and that's delivered by the team. Some of the training is also delivered by our head of corporate safeguarding, but we also have, you know, team teach. There's a robust programme then to assist staff in working in a strengths-based and trauma-informed way in order to care for our most vulnerable children.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Chair.
So just ask you one question on that. Are we paying any supplements to either attract or retain staff?
No, we're not.
Councillor Harvey.
Mr. Chair, I'm going through the youth justice box, and we got 7 pieces of it. 5 are in red, only 2 are in green. There's reoffending, like criminal exploitation, criminal sexual exploitation. And then above that, it says that we're going to delete a post in the youth justice team. Do you think that's wise? I know it's 43k, and I know what the budgets are. It's a nightmare. But to lose another member of staff from there, I think would be a bit.
There has been a restructure, and that's I suppose the restructure we move budgets around in order to strengthen the I suppose the oversight and management, and that was basically as part of the recommendation from HMIC in terms of having further managerial oversight. So in doing that, although we're losing that post, we've been able to create another team manager post. I don't know in terms of the revs, Jay, if I would like Jay to.
It's just to show them, and I think, you know, that I've met a number of times to talk about this. It's really typical, for example, that we just refer to the remand figures.
Yeah.
The challenge for the local authorities, we get very limited grant funding for it, but unfortunately, as you probably understand the picture at the moment, grants are really difficult because we've had 4 very recent remands.
Yeah.
But actually, there's circumstances where we wouldn't have had contact or known each of them young people previously. So there are occasions where children who come into the system who service wouldn't have been aware of, wouldn't have had any knowledge of, even within a prevention capacity. So it's very difficult to predict. But the challenge for us as a local authorities, it's quite a significant budget and has a huge impact for us. So we're obviously very keen to make sure that you're aware as members, and obviously as part of Scrutiny, so that you know the impact that it's having on the service, that it's something that's not within our control really, which is a real challenge. But obviously we can do to continue to monitor that. And one of the focuses at the moment is just about ensuring that we can offer a robust community-based package when the children are released. The other areas, and we've probably talked about this before, but we're definitely seeing an increase in more serious offences at the moment, children and young people. And it's quite a sad and worrying picture, particularly as you're seeing obviously the issues with knife crime. The thing that probably I guess I can say to you that we're trying to focus on at the moment is a more robust response. We're being proactive. We're part of a working group at the moment to look at developing a collective strategy to address knife crime, particularly and harmful weapons. And we're looking to externally commission somebody to come in, and it will be a strategy across all partners in Newport. So it's not just going to be Newport Council. We want to bring everybody together. But some of the positive bits of work they're going on there are really about raising people's awareness. We want to build more, I guess, with the community, working in partnership with communities, so that they can also support in this, to be more alert and aware of that, but also proactively tackle it. But we're looking at building a positive media campaign around it. So the idea is really to try and tackle this head on. But it's really to say to you, the picture is worrying. One of the other more difficult trends that we're seeing, and we've talked about this a number of times, is the fact that actually children and young people are being processed through the criminal justice system in a timely manner. And my worry at this current point in time is that you've got children and young people who probably are involved in offences, but they're not being dealt with in the most appropriate restorative way. So what we're really concerned about is we'd like to be getting more involved at a much earlier end of the string, so we can do more targeted work. The subplot for us as a service is that unless they're on the correct order, we can't really do the level of detail work we'd like to be doing. And so I guess my concern right now, and I have raised this with police colleagues, and we are going to the next Child Centre Policing forum to discuss this, is how we work with CPS to actually ensure that a more robust response is happening much earlier down the trend, because that's the worry really. When we talked about this, we have young people really going through the system who are unfortunately not getting the right kind of consequential work, and it's happening at a much later stage. And my worry is they're 17, 18 and this is happening. It's too late for us. So it's really just to assure you we're being as proactive as we can, but it's really essential that it's police and primarily CPS. They're a big key partner in this process. They're on board, but I just want you to be aware that I've raised this with the Criminal Justice Board. They're very aware of some of the pressures currently going on, but it's being proactively tackled. And obviously Reece is our chair, he's very aware of it. So it's really to say to you, it's firmly on the agenda. But I think the challenge, and I know Caroline will probably remember, there was a period of time where in Newport the focus of the work was very much on preventative agenda. Unfortunately, because of the way the system's working post-COVID, there's lots and lots of issues happening. So really, there's delays within the system now, and I think my worry is children are just not getting the right response at the right time. But it's because of other challenges within the broader system. It's not our offer. And I just want to also assure you that as a service, we provide the same level of response. It doesn't matter where they are in the journey. We will provide the same interventions, the same services across the board. So it's really to say to you, from a local authority point of view, we can do the very best that we possibly can, but it's really dependent on other aspects of the system.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I do think, and this is something that we picked up when we had the pre-meet with the chair. What I'd like to do is to look at the way that we're rating these, because there is, even though they're reds, in some respects, there's no right or wrong number here. So I could pick out an example, is the percentage of children, of cases open to the service where there's criminal exploitation or sexual exploitation identified. Now, we've labelled that as red, but in the scheme of things, it could well be, should it be a red? Because we're actually identifying those children, and therefore we're then working with them to reduce that risk. So for me, I do think there is something within children's services that we need to do to have a look at that RAG rating, because I don't think, you're naturally drawn to the reds. I don't think that's a bad thing personally. I think, particularly around that one, we're identifying children early, we're getting in, we're doing the preventative work, we're managing the risk. Should that be a red? I don't think so. So we'll look at that the next time.
Okay, yeah. It's Jay, I know I've had the children's service teams with. I know firsthand what you do. My concern is, one, CPS. I'm dealing with a case in my ward. It's just been ongoing for far too long. It's insane. And they keep throwing it back. So I get where you're coming from with CPS. They are a nightmare. I'm really concerned if we lose another youth justice team member and we've got all these kids coming through. I've had the stats for my ward. It's shocking. It will be raised tonight, and it's eye-opening. Serious sexual violence and knife crime in my ward is on another level. And my concern is these kids are being trafficked into crime. We haven't got the staff or the wherewithal to get in there early enough. Like before you know it, they end up in prison and their life is done. So we need to be a little bit more, maybe where we're police, to be fair, they have a lot to answer for as well, because there's only so much we can do as officers. When the police are arresting or picking them up or whatever, they need to be feeding back to you in the first instance, because you can't do what you don't know. So if you're not aware of these kids, how on earth are you supposed to help them? Is my main concern, if I'm honest. But thanks for that. Yeah.
Eva?
Thank you very much, and apologies for lateness today. First question is a point of clarity. On page number 8 on the report, or 21 on the main council one, it's just a bit of clarity on the percentages. It says the end of year 23-24 is 75%, but then it says mid-year 24-25 is 20%. I'm just wondering, is that a hindsight error somewhere?
So is that in relation to the residential children's home?
Yeah, it's just the percentages there. One says 75, it looks like we're going back rather than moving forward. So it's just whether or not that's a.
I think that's in that I know that's in relation to us now having to develop further residential provision. So our initial intention was only to develop so many children's homes. Now actually we're going beyond what we
Yeah, so there was no.
there's no error. So what we've said is that we're on our road to achieving that. We were 75% because we were nearly achieving what we initially intended to achieve, but now we're going further and we're looking at a further 5 homes. So
Thank you for that clarity. So I was trying to work it out, but there's no additional thing to read on the notes. The other point on there is the page before, and it's about the staffing side of things. So looking at the sickness lost, sickness days lost even. And I know it was normally good and below average, the last year, and I see that that's actually increased this year. And then I look over the other side of it about the bi-monthly check-ins, and that is just kind of not so much concern, just more of a reassurance to the committee here today, whether or not there's other things in play, because obviously there's a target line there, but we're not quite from that seeing that target being met. And can you reassure us that the staff are being looked after in that way, the clinical welfare checks, and just make sure that things are going okay, because there is really complex cases that come through the door, and just to make sure that our staff are fully supported.
yeah. So in terms of the sickness level, so in Q2, we were low, we were below the average for the council. We then had, so we've looked into why there's been such an increase in Q2, and we have seen a number of staff with respiratory illnesses. So a number of staff have acquired that, hence the significant increase in Q2. So these aren't stress related illnesses, they're viruses. In terms of the check-ins, that's something that we intend to do a deeper dive into, because what we've noted is that we're having reassurances to our own internal audits of supervision records that supervisions are taking place, but within children's services we record in 2 different places. So we'll undertake a supervision whereby that's on a Word document saved within Word, and also then saved on the individual's record. And then we go on to iTrent, which is a corporate recording mechanism, and upload the check-ins on that. I'm not entirely confident that staff are always doing the true process. I know that they're recording on Word, so they're having the 4 weekly check-ins, but not necessarily inputting them on iTrent where this data comes from. Also, we've identified is there are some slight errors in this database. So, for example, sometimes when staff are on maternity leave or on longer periods of absences, it's reporting that they haven't received a check-in. And also sometimes when you upload the document, it doesn't necessarily save as it should. So we have raised that with our corporate colleagues, and in the new year there's an intention that we will work together in order to rectify that, because the data doesn't reflect the activity.
Very much. It's positive on that side, obviously having the experience on the other side, knowing the work that goes in. But if you look at obviously what's on paper, it's a completely different contrast to what's actually on the ground. So it's good to have that reassurance today on that. The other side on the report is just basically like for others, it's a concern about a lot of the work being done is through grants. So it's just about that stability moving forward, because I know we had a positive kind of thing with the Welsh Government, with the Eliminate agenda. It's just about how we move forward with that concern and worry about, as we are experiencing challenging budgets, within the last couple of years and potentially moving into the future, just about how we ensure that stability without that, necessarily concern about, are we going to get the grants? And fair play to the team, really, really good at getting those grants, on that side, really positive for Newport. But we shouldn't always be, hopefully, having that thing to really need those grants in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can't be that the grant issue is always there, and unfortunately we are reliant on those grants to deliver our core services, and we don't have the assurance from Welsh Government at this stage that some of those grants are going to continue beyond April 24. We believe they are, but we haven't had that confirmed, so we are always in this very difficult position of doing that balancing act. But the facts are that those grants are propping up our core services. Welsh Government have fully cited on that, and at every opportunity, I know Natalie and the team and Nick and myself are lobbying Welsh Government. And in fact, we recently had the Minister here to showcase some of the work that's being done by one of those grants, to show the importance of it and the impact that would happen if those grants were not to continue.
And fully agree with that, no doubt around it. It's that concern, especially when we see it, within the documents that go to cabinet and things like that, they're about the finances, and it's always, higher and things like that on that side. But we've been very lucky, I said, in the past for that grants, but it's about how it looks with revenue and just about how we are protected. So, on that side, definitely taken on board what you've suggested there. The other question I've got is about how do we feel in terms of confidence, will we be quite there within Eliminate when it comes in properly, and whether or not we've got the right resources, and is there anything that's needed to combat the challenges, and is there any challenges?
As I mentioned earlier, I think we're ahead of the game in comparison to some other local authorities. Of course, there's challenges because we still haven't been given any indication of funding that's going to come from Welsh Government to support local authorities in terms of the implementation. There are also challenges in terms of securing properties within the city that are actually likely to meet the needs of our children, because when you're looking for properties for some of our children, you have to consider the environment and a number of other factors. So yes, there are ongoing challenges, and as Councillor Watkins mentioned earlier, in terms of recruitment of staff, we're all likely to be competing for the same pool of staff, so we have to be mindful of that. But I'm confident that we're in a relatively good position, and we just continue to lobby Welsh Government, as Tanya has just said, in terms of requiring that sum of money. They're very clear in terms of the amount of money that we will need to have in order to get over the line. So hopefully they will deliver.
Thank you very much for that. And I know, as you mentioned with my colleague Councillor Watkins, about all children, should be able to come back from out of area. And I know one of the other areas about those with complex needs and disabilities, sometimes we just can't cater for those. Whether or not there's a number, it's probably going to be minor, but is there a number in the background of any of those out of county for that purpose? But the other one is about the nature and working with the private firms at the moment, because they seem to be trying to play the system with Eliminate and trying to work around. So whereas, we're trying to get not for profit, a lot of them are basically doing a company in England, and the way that they're trying to, I'm not going to say for the money, but try and work around the money. So they're not for profit in Wales, but they are for profit in England. Are we experiencing, and how are we working in that environment currently?
So there's a number of national, local and regional groups that are set up, and we all meet regularly in order to address these issues, the issues that you've just referred to. And I think that's why it's really important for Newport to become self-sufficient, because ultimately we'll have, from my perspective, we'll have greater control in terms of the care that we deliver for our children. We'll have control over the staffing, the training that's provided. And in Newport, we don't give notice on our children. So my vision is that we will become self-sufficient where we possibly can. One of the areas that you did refer to is children with complex needs. Absolutely, hence why we went down, because Bridgeview is a home, 6-bed home for children with disabilities. And we purchased, or we went into an agreement with First Choice in order to secure that home, in order to meet those children that are currently out of county. So absolutely, we've worked on what the children we currently have in external provisions, and forecast what we're likely to require by 2027 in order that we're catering for all of the children.
Yeah, just to pick up on President Marshall's point about the companies operating out of England, there is a move by Westminster now they're looking at what we've done in Wales, what they're doing in Wales to pass this legislation, and that is conversations that are starting to happen in England as well. So the future may well be that all of the country takes the not-for-profit approach in relation to children's care.
Very much on that side. And I think some of those projects I know from previous has been that regional kind of working as well. Just wondering where we've been self-sufficient, would there be an opportunity moving forward, if needs, to have a bit of revenue income from other local authorities, where it'd be a bit more positive working relationship with other local authorities, rather than them going to the private firms and obviously having 2, 3, 4, even more times the percentage while we're waiting for that, because that's where they catch us at the moment as we're trying to obviously build that in. And I know we're in a better position, but is there that mechanism at all within the authority?
Absolutely, and in terms of Cambridge House, that's our home for an accompanied asylum-seeking children. The intention is that we will sell 4 of those beds, because Newport actually has quite a good offer for those children. So that offer is not just regionally, but it's Wales wide. So we've had some interest from the council in Pembrokeshire in order to kind of to seek support from us in meeting those children's needs. We currently already sell a bed in one of our other children's home, and we're likely to also sell a bed in Bridgeview. So when we look at developing our children's home, it's always with a sort of a careful eye on where we can bring in revenue where possible.
Very much. And I think where we mentioned about you as the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and I think, you know, especially during the election and stuff like that, there was a lot of that type of thing in the media and about the, you know, young people, but also just general people that are coming on the boat, so to speak. Trying to stay away from the political side of things. It's just more the fact of how do you feel operating in the environment with that type of political background? Has it caused troubles? And, you know, where do we see ourselves within the city?
From my perspective, we haven't seen any challenges. We have a strong immigration team offer and to support our young people, and we collaborate a lot with the third sector. The children that we tend to support are children that engage in education, that want to succeed, that want to go on and secure employment. But that hasn't been a particular challenge for us. I'll just refer to Jake, the immigration team. Are there any issues that have been highlighted?
No, not that I'm aware of it. Potentially, as you said, so you've got really good relationships. We work with the for example, that's a really trusted.
I compliment that and work with the work of Mark Seymour, and as we said about the third party side of things, or third sector side of things. And I know from experience talking to some of those young people looking at like engineering and looking to really progress moving forward. And I think it just kind of harnesses, and it's supportive in that statement now, that it is a welcoming city, and hopefully that you know showcases that, and we are doing our best for these young people as well. So that is really positive in that regard. The other area to pick up is just about the foster carers locally and about how we're doing in that regard, looking at things like, you know, what's the demographics in terms of those that are older, retiring off, how will we, you know, replacing those? and what's the appetite in that regard? Yeah, about that way.
Yeah, we've got a dedicated recruitment officer that is supporting us alongside. So we've got Foster Newport. We've also linking carefully with Foster Wales. We do have a number of inquiries. Sometimes we have a drop off at that point. So I have requested that we do a bit of an analysis about what is the rationale behind people dropping off after point of inquiry. In terms of, I don't think that that's necessarily linked to pay or support, because when we compare ourselves to other local authorities, we're not the lowest pay, we're not the highest pay, we're middle of the road, which I'm comfortable with at the moment. We do have, a significant, package of support for our foster carers, which includes the MIST, My Support Team, which offers consultations, training, and wraparound support for our children. I think, as all other local authorities, not just in Wales but UK wide, I think there is a national shortage of foster carers, and I suppose that there's further concern with eliminating, in terms of those private agencies leaving the market. What I would say is that Newport, in terms of children residing in independent fostering agencies, we've got a relatively low number, and year on year our data suggests that we're using agencies far less than our own homes, our own foster care homes.
Great, thank you. And I think one of the things that I had learned about time, especially when we had the event at Live Citizens and things like that, then when you talk to foster parents, a lot of them is word of mouth. Not necessarily out. And I know we had like the John Lewis advert a couple of years ago at Christmas and things like that to try and encourage. And there was, a lot of things going through the Foster Wales website, but it's about how, fruitful that becomes. And I think the majority still comes from word of mouth. It's about how we still get around that, which comes to the next question about how are we trying to get into those with diverse communities? Because sometimes that could be a barrier in itself, and we really need to make sure, where possible, that young people can be kind of somewhat matched to those of their similar background, if we can. Just how successful are we being, or is there ways that you think we as local elected members could support you within that regard?
Of course, promotion from elected members is, will always be welcome. We do try and get out into the community with a stall and attend many different events. We're working now, but the service manager for resources, Louise, is looking at, further advertising in terms of vehicles. We were thinking possibly about buses. Our numbers in terms of foster carers from diverse backgrounds is relatively low, given that we are a diverse city, but we are conscious of that, and we continue to seek foster carers from diverse communities, but there's generally a low uptake.
Great, thank you. Another side of areas, just about with children with disabilities, about how they've been supported to transition into the adulthood successfully, because in the past that transition has been kind of like they're a child one day, as soon as they hit 18 they're an adult, and they kind of, it wasn't as joined up. And I know there's been a lot of work being done over the last couple of years to make sure that transition is as smooth as possible. Just want to hear if there's been any other news and basically or updates in relation to that, and if you want to advise us of anything that's been done to move forward, if you can.
Yeah, we've currently got a really robust system in place in terms of children with, I suppose, diagnosed disabilities. So at the point of age of 14, they are known to adult services, and there's a clear transition pathway between our disabled children's team and adult services. I think we've recognised that sometimes there is a bit of a cliff edge for some children with complex trauma needs at the point of 18 that don't necessarily have a diagnosis. I think we're keen to strengthen that offer then, if you like, between the transition from children's to adults. And I know that the new head of adult services, Mabani Moran, and I have touched briefly on kind of how we can address that moving forward, and that will be on our agenda as we progress through the year.
Great, and I know it's that'll be of support to parents and things like that, because that's their biggest worry a lot of times. Obviously, it's just like what happens with a child as soon as they turn 18, because things don't change as soon as they're 18. It's only obviously that legal definition, isn't it, of what becomes an adult. So that's quite positive to hear that, and I do appreciate it, and thank you. The last question is about just the safeguarding elements within the authority. As we're increasing in terms of population, there's a likelihood of increased risks and things like that derive from that potentially. Just about how we're dealing with the potential complexities of cases being managed operationally, but also sometimes the questioning of, does the duty of reports that we get in, are they of good value? Do we need to train organisations, things like that? Because I know there was issues with the police for sometimes and other bodies, and whether or not it's kind of cover one's behind kind of thing when it comes to paperwork, but are we making sure that what we're actually getting in is fruitful, that the fact that we know what we're putting in, why we're putting it in, rather than just the fact that we think we've got to put it in just to cover up behind, essentially. Where do we see ourselves safeguarding in that regard?
I think there's always been a tendency, because it's police policy, to refer everything into children's services. And we screen that out. That is a conversation that we've had with our police colleagues, but unfortunately, that is routine. That all incidents involving children are referred into children's services. What I would say is we do have really positive working relationships with our police colleagues that are actually situated within our safeguarding hub. So, if there are any issues, then they're very quickly resolved. In terms of our education colleagues, in terms of quality of referrals that come through to us, we've now got 2 workers that are direct links to education that sit within the safeguarding hub, and they assist us in kind of having those direct conversations, those early conversations with education to consider the appropriateness of referrals. And what we've also got is we've got the prevention and inclusion team, so that preventative arm, and also the Youth Justice Service also screening those referrals at an early point to ensure that referrals are directed to the right service at the right time.
I think on just a comment now on that side, I think within it, I think it's questionable sometimes where they think, is it safeguarding when the parent could be a really, really good parent to the community? However, they're experiencing things of poverty and very thing, whether or not that is a duty to report, or is that a signposting to get them support and things like that about how they navigate through that. So it's an interesting dynamic, but I think it's about how we move forward. And if there's anything else like that, I think as elected members that we can support in, and to make sure that we understand what it is to safeguard, because we're out in the communities as well. I think that's imperative. So thank you very much.
Are there any other questions?
It's really on the homes which you have, the children's homes which you have, residential homes which you have. About 3 years ago, members used to visit these homes and have a report sent to social services. That was taken off members and went to officers then to do that. And the reports were going to come back to the Scrutiny committee to look at. Since then, we've had no reports at all from officers on the homes, their functioning, or whether they're in good order, or whether money is to be spent on them. I would be grateful if we could have a final report at the end of the financial year on those reports.
That there is a report that's completed by both the registered individual of adult homes and also children's homes, and that goes to the part which scrutiny, different scrutiny.
So,
Annual report.
I suppose I just want to provide you with some assurance in the first instance that there was a change in regulation which is why that function was taken off members. And we now have 2 officers that are called responsible individuals. So we have one that inspects our children's homes and one that inspects our adult homes. And those, they complete a very comprehensive report at the end of each of those visits that goes to the head of service. That also comes to myself. And I've agreed only last week, in fact, with the chief exec, those reports have gone to the executive board on a routine basis. They're going to go there on a 6-monthly basis now with the formal end of year report. Certainly we could look to bring that end of year report into the scrutiny arena if members would like to see that.
I would like that, even if it's a briefing, not full report, just a briefing with everything, especially if something needs to be done.
Certainly we could take that as an
Okay,
action.
that's
Chair.
what we don't cover.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for anybody? Okay, well, thank you both very much. And thank you to your team for your responses. And, unless you want to stay and listen to the rest, you can, but otherwise you can.
Okay, thank you very much. Helpful. Well, I've still got off the table just for me to go through what I've noted around recommendations. I've noted another committee's comment about highlighting the importance of preventative work with children and young people, and obviously our recommendation about receiving the report on the homes reports at the end of the year. That's all I've got. Is there anything anyone wants to add for children's services?
Just, well, if there's any issues in regards to training new staff coming in, then we'd like to know about it.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll have a hand over now to adult services. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm still going to hand over to the man. We give you an overview, a brief overview of the report.
Roy Dalpow. I'm delighted to be here to present my first Adult Services Mid-Year Report to you today. So as Tanya was saying there, I'll just give a very brief overview and then I'll welcome any questions from yourselves. So I have to say, since joining the service in September, I've been so impressed by the staff in adult services, our best asset, who work exceptionally hard across Newport to protect people's rights and ensure they can live with the right care and support in the community. The challenges and risks remain really, as previously outlined, but there's much to be celebrated when we look back over the last 6 months. So to start with our achievements, so we have many excellent internal provisions run by the council. These include our residential homes and newly acquired Centrica Lodge, which recently had a very positive inspection from Care Inspectorate Wales in June this year. As part of that inspection, people provided feedback about their experiences of the service. That was families and people who were attending the service, and that's enabled a further review to tailor the support offered. T Clare in Cullion has opened, and that's a fantastic purpose-built home for people with learning disabilities. The provision will hugely enhance people's lives, and we're very proud of it. So to provide effective care and support to people, we have to have good relationships with providers of social care services. And over the last 6 months, I'm pleased to report the stability of this market has increased. And our ability to provide vital community services such as domiciliary care to people in the community is among the best in Wales. So we have a very timely response in terms of providing domiciliary. We've recently relaunched our assistive technology hub in the local library and are working on a detailed plan to increase awareness of that and deliver the maximum benefits to citizens. So there's so many opportunities to support people at home for longer by using technology effectively. And we need to really positively exploit all of those opportunities. There's some case studies included at the end of the mid-year report for details on the difference it can make to people's lives and real tangible differences there. So as you'd expect at the mid-year, our projects and programmes of work remain ongoing. I'm sure you'll be aware of the restructure of adult services, which occurred last year and earlier this year as well. So as part of that, there's a redesign and I suppose a review of some key service areas to ensure we're making the best use of our resources, and the budget and finances been mentioned already this morning a number of times. So we have to ensure that we've got the most effective and efficient services possible. So this includes a review of the occupational therapy service and the front door for safeguarding, and they really occurred as a result of the redesign of adult. So there's much to be celebrated at the end of the report in terms of the detailed performance information. However, the challenges. So as you can see from the performance information, the demand of referrals over the last 12 months. So I'm sure you'll have noticed yourself, there's over 100 more referrals. As has already been mentioned, with regard to children's services, it's a similar picture in adults. So the complexity of the people's presenting needs. So I suppose to give you an example, you know, something that a social worker may have been able to go out and see somebody for a one-off assessment is now taking 2 or 3 or 4 visits. So that gives you an idea, I suppose. And as I say, demand on adult social care, similar picture across England and Wales, we're not unusual. But there's only so many times I think that demand can be described as unprecedented before it becomes business as usual. And, you know, the Chief Inspector of Care, Inspector at Wales, described it as unprecedented, WLGA. So I'm not on my own when I say these messages, really. And I suppose there is a real need to increase the population of staff who are approved mental health professionals for Newport. So they are the people who undertake mental health act assessments for people. And we really need to increase the number of people that we're putting through for training for that. And we've begun a review of the service and agreed to an increase to additional staff payments for 24-25. So that's really positive when considering the financial positions. We're concerned, you know, this has already been mentioned, about some of the funding we have from Welsh Government to support some of our statutory function around DOLS, so deprivation of liberty safeguards, where people don't have capacity. And that's a vital safeguard for some of our most vulnerable citizens in care homes in particular. We know social care can be such a rewarding career, such a rewarding field to work in, and Social Care Wales are very clear that most of the workforce go into social care to make a difference to people's lives, but it can be really challenging as well. And as has already been spoken about this morning, we've got to support staff properly. So regular good quality supervision is one of our mechanisms, and I think it's fair to be open and say that the percentages that are in the report are not where we would want to be in terms of the check-ins and one-to-one supervision. So that does need to improve. So in terms of the second half, we'll continue to progress our projects, transition to assistive technology being offered across adult social care. Adults is very complex. It's very intertwined inextricably with the health board, with our other partners. And I think we need to look at how we're working, you know, with the hospitals. Now we're going into the winter period as well. So there's a lot of work to be done in terms of progressing some of our projects, but we'll continue to work closely with partners to progress some of those. So yeah, I think that's me. So I'd welcome any questions now, Chair. Thank you.
I can't see anybody indicating online. No. So Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, adult services, vision and objectives. Item number 3 on there. Continue developing and improving sustainability of adult services through full projection. So how do you do that?
Well, I think there's a number of ways that you can co-produce services and understand, I suppose, what the demand of your population is. So we have a number of, I suppose, area plans, market stability reports, which tell us what the population of Newport requires, and we can see from the demographics, I suppose, some of those. So that's at a strategic level for planning. I suppose when we think about co-production, we think about meeting with individuals and carers to ask them, you know, what services they want, and also using our own performance information. So I think a good example of that recently is in terms of Centrica Lodge. So that's a provision for people with learning disabilities that we've taken back in-house. So it's now run by us as the council. And we've looked at what we're offering there currently for people. And we recognise that people with learning disabilities, particularly since the pandemic, there's been a move away from people attending, I suppose, day services and day support in the way that people may have done in the past. And actually, if you can plan people's support and tailor it better to their needs, but in order to do that, you know, we don't want to do two people in that way. So say to them, this is the service offer, and you're going to, you know, attend here and have this one particular service. It really is about meeting with people and their families to say, what do you want from this service? How can we make this better? We may not have any additional resources, but can we deploy the resources we've got in a more tailored way to meet your needs, I suppose.
Do you use outside providers if we're unable to accommodate the individual?
Outside providers in terms of residential homes and things, yes, we would do that if we were unable to. We do have internal provision in Newport, and the quality of the internal provision, and you know, is very, very good. But if we couldn't source what we needed, I suppose in-house and internally, we do place people with external providers.
Be looking at to increase the properties to accommodate the children which we have, or the adults which we need to accommodate, rather than use the private outside provider.
I think that is a really interesting question, because I think you know, obviously in children's services we've had very explicit policy direction in terms of eliminate.
And it's been successful. I wondered whether it could actually do exactly the same for the adults.
I think it'd be very naive and short-sighted for us to not consider what provision we need, what demand is coming in the future. You know, we have very high occupancy rates in terms of our care homes, but what we also have to focus on in adult services is keeping people in their own homes and independent for as long as possible. So we understand that for most people, that's what is important to them. They would rather, if you did a population survey, the results would likely say, actually, I would like to remain as independent as possible. I'd like to remain in my own home for as long as I possibly can, with support coming in. And of course, carers have a role in that, as does assistive technology. So if we can put assistive technology in to prompt people to take their medication, to close the curtains at night, to help people, if someone falls, to have that confidence that somebody is going to attend the property, that means they can stay at home for as long as possible. But in adult services, you need a range of provisions. So you need extra care housing, or you know, sheltered accommodation, extra care housing, and then care homes, I suppose, tend to be where people go when they need the highest amount of care that can't be provided in the community.
How do you ensure those safeguarding arrangements when it's the support is needed at home?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's very difficult. Then you cannot monitor 24 hours unless you've got something there 24 hours. So how do you ensure the safeguarding of that individual?
Yeah, I think that is a real challenge for us.
Do you find any difficulties?
The Wales safeguarding procedures are very clear in that they outline what we should be doing when we get reports of an adult at risk, and the pathway then is set out for how we protect. And I suppose in some ways adult safeguarding has moved to mirror some aspects of children's safeguarding over the last few years. So you now have strategy discussions, strategy meetings where you pull all your partners in to say, well, you're a community safety officer, what could you do in terms of, you know, walking past the person's property or whatever. It depends, I suppose it depends really on the type of abuse that you consider the adults may be at risk of. But yeah, there's been much more of a driver, I think, to work in partnership together as part of those procedures. But you're right, it's very challenging when people are in their own home. I think there's a number of different elements that can be offered. Again, assistive technology would tell you, well, a person may have opened the fridge, or a person may have. So if you were concerned about neglect, potentially you could make an assessment on that. But as I said in my introduction, the landscape of adult social care now, the complexities of it, actually our workers are used to care and support planning in very complex situations and scenarios. So I think it does largely depend on the individual. But I've been in Newport a short time now, but I can already see the partners' relationships are really strong. So with the police, obviously we've got our head of corporate safeguarding, which isn't a role that you have in lots of authorities, and that gives weight really to the safeguarding agenda.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Nothing for me, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Marsh?
Thank you, Chair. I think with some of the questions that asked have been answered in your report, so thank you very much for that clarity. I think it's just mainly about the integration with health services. I know, like in other forums, I've mentioned about, you know, the winter crisis, you know, the winter pressures. It always seems to be the winter pressures. It's like, surprise, surprise, winter comes once a year, we know it's coming. And I think it's just about how, you know, we're basically being better in that. And as you said, kind of that business is normal. It's just about how we feel the integration with the health board and also the health board and other partners. And I know partnerships is a slightly different forum, and I've raised questions in this before, but how do we feel that we can move forward as a local authority in this, basing on the fact that there is concern that it's business as normal? How do we get out of this business as normal? And it's not necessarily about funding, it's about the territorial aspects of resources as well. But would you?
Yeah, I think that is a really good question. And in adult services, we are so interdependent on our partners, and particularly, as you said, the health board. You know, we have professionals such as occupational therapists that we've got in the local authority and adult services team, but obviously also work in the health board, for example. At the moment, we have a frailty service which is integrated with the health board, and I think you're right. I suppose you can feel, because the health board is regional as well, you know, I suppose like a small player in that partnership, in all honesty. And it's about having those positive relationships. For me, coming in as a new head of service, building on those relationships. It's also the Gwent region as well. So the other partnerships that are really important are our other local authorities in Gwent. So, you know, I suppose any challenges the health board are having will also be impacting on those other local authorities. So it's about kind of pooling our resources together, thinking what is regional, what can we work in partnership on. There's a number of projects in the plan that we are working in partnership, but also thinking about, well, we are Newport, what is right for Newport? You know, what do we need for our population, which is very different from some of the other Gwent authorities. So for me, it's thinking, and I suppose holding all of those different competing demands at the same time is the challenge of a head of service, and prioritising, but protecting, I suppose, what we can influence. It's about our sphere of influence and our sphere of control, isn't it? So as you said there about the winter pressures, we could spend all of our time concentrating on winter pressures and do nothing else, in all honesty. But winter pressures now are in summer because everybody's on leave in August. So people who have been trying to get operations, who are on waiting lists, all of those things really impact on our staff as well as the people that we work with. So I think it's about being really clear about what we need to work in partnership on, having influence where we can, and having good relationships that are open and honest, and saying at times, you know, this partnership really isn't working. So for me, it's all of those things. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer.
Thank you. And I think the bit, you know, I do volunteering outside organisation which has the integration of St John essentially. So we do see a lot of things and hear a lot of things as well. I think you know, as much as there's good work being done, I think sometimes there's elements within the front door aspect of prevention, you know, avoid them going in, that's that side of thing. And I know that that's within a slightly different area. And then there's the kind of try to get them back into the community. And there's the whole aspect of community care. Can they go into like GPs? Can they get access? And if they can't, they're in hospital. If they're in hospital, they might get worse because they're in hospital out of the community setting. There's a whole range of things that obviously go on from there. Ladies, it's not just then you put adult services bubble. It's reliance, and you know, it's kind of thing of everything else. Like dominoes, isn't it? If one has pressure, the whole system has the pressure throughout, and it's about how we try and interact with that pressure. And as you said quite rightly, it's not just winter pressures anymore; it's all year pressures, isn't it? It's very much on that side, and you know, it's about how we work around that. And I got questions later for the P&I about unpaid carers and that, but also it's recognition about when you are basically talking, and it's slightly off, but in more the fact of when you're talking to people about but like family members about what care and things that need to be sorted, and it's about recognition of whether or not people are carers and knowing right what is it that they do, and pinpointing them and making sure that they are picked up and they know there's track the act. I know that Carers Wales have been doing the things, and just to make sure that we're doing what we can to pick that up and to make sure, because I know it's a question, are you a carer? It's like, no, I'm not a carer. But it's just say, do you do those things and tasks for your mum, dad, brother, sister? And straight away, well, yeah, but they don't accumulate that with being a carer as well. So it's just about how we intervene with that, but also how we integrate that within the council services to make sure that if people aren't being supportive on one side, that we're not basically being difficult on another side in terms of language barriers and communication. Another, like the financial side compared to obviously the support side. So one side would be, let's help you, let's support you. Another side could be sometimes a little bit more like, well, we can't talk to you because this is financial, this is personal. It's like, yeah, but they have A, B, and C. We need to be a little bit more conjoined in our working.
Yeah, very important point, right? Unpaid carers, support for unpaid carers is definitely something that we're working across on, because obviously it impacts on a lot on adult services as well.
And I think on another point, it's just basically I've seen the AI and technology and things like that there, so I know it's been opened up to committee members to see as well. But I think it would just be interesting if there's any updates to that moving forward, any new technology, and that would you let the committee also know, because it's okay, within our 5-10 whatever minutes sphere that we look at it, technology is increasing threefold every minute, every day. It's doing tasks that we never thought we'd be able to do. So we just need to be on the ball with it and actually say, can our community members benefit from any of this technology to come in and explore that? And it's just about whether or not that has seen a vast improvement or significant change in the way that we are giving out care, because I know those things like domiciliary care, about opening curtains and things like that, well, you can get machines to do some of that task now, so the actual carer can come in and do other tasks which are more prudent to that individual that needs it. So it's just about how we have you noticed that type of I know you've been here a short time, but have you seen any figures or stats or statements of case studies to signify that?
Yeah. Yes, I have. Yeah, so a couple of the case studies are included in the end of the report. But you're exactly right. We need to actually, we've now positively got an assistive technology coach who will be showing members around on the 3rd of December to the library to show what's on offer currently. But you're right, technology offer is changing all the time. But as part of that project, we have a communication plan that's going out to each of our areas to say, what are the opportunities in this area? So, for example, with the reablement carers, so those people who work really closely to enable people or re-able people in the community. So you think straight away, well, that is ideal, to actually be less intrusive in people's lives, to potentially save on carers' times, to ensure that carers are doing the things that we really want them to do. So there are many opportunities that we're looking at in terms of the use of technology, and it's not for everybody, and it won't be for every care call, obviously, but it's something that needs to be at the forefront of that assessment process.
Thank you very much. And I think within that, and I think it's just understanding our community members more. And I think the younger lot, which are starting to have mobility issues, are more tech savvy compared to our older population in that regard. I wonder if it's possible to kind of, I don't know if it's ward by ward level, but understanding kind of in the city, just what type of complexities that we have, how many people we're seeing maybe in specific fields, like those are, with dementia, those with mobility issues and things like that there, just so we can understand what we're catering for at the moment, as speaking in dealing with what support we're providing, but also what we are looking potentially at in the future, just so we can grasp what it is. So then when we are obviously, scrutinizing that, we understand that, are we on top of the ball, and just to be able to acknowledge that and see that, but also in our ways to understand as well what is in our communities, because we don't know. There's people behind closed doors that could have a number of different things there, but we wouldn't know the numbers or anything else like that there. So the numbers potentially would actually say and remind us, actually, we need to be on our guard a little bit more and see, when we're out and about, is there things that we can be doing more, watching out for, and things like that there. As part of that.
we'll certainly look at the data and see if it's possible to drill down to
Yeah.
that level of detail. I can't tell you, what was certainly
Yeah, we
consider that.
certainly consider that. I think we do work to outcomes, so we work to, despite what diagnosis people have got, we will work to the outcomes and what matters to them and look at their strengths and but the community resources as well. But it's a valid point around the number of people we've got, who have a care and support plan with adult services, and also it's quite easy to say the word complexity, but if I suppose present some of the scenarios to you and a bit like professional safeguarding, you'd see, I suppose, in a more tangible way, the types of difficulties that people are facing in their lives, which I'm sure you're aware of as counsellors in any case, but in terms of adult services,
I think it's that definition of complexities as well,
Yeah.
because what was complex 10 years ago, we've been able to alleviate some of those pressures, and that's so it's always recognised in the terminology that we're using and what it actually defines as, which is also important. There's just one other thing about just how will the service mitigate risks associated with rising care package costs, and about the sustainability of funding challenges moving forward, because I know that that's a big issue, not just on a local level, it is pretty much a national UK, not just national Wales, and about how we see ourselves moving forward with the challenges and pressures.
Yeah, so that was obviously on our service area risks. It's on page 4 of my report around the stability of social service providers. And I think that is always, I suppose, a concern for us, both as a provider. So the council is obviously a provider of services as well, but working with our independent private providers as well. And there are many very good independent providers. So it's not saying that, the independent sector aren't delivering what we want them to, but it's you're right, trying to ensure that they're sustainable for the future is really challenging. And there's things, we've had a recent budget, so the living wage, the real, and you want to pay people properly for undertaking these jobs, which, as I said in my introduction, are rewarding but are also really challenging. So it's about I suppose enabling people, not just through I suppose money and through the revenue that we provide to them, but also working with them to build up those relationships. What social value may you be offering in your community, how can we enable you to recruit and retain people, a little bit like the conversation in children's services. So there's a number of things. I mean, the stability of the market has increased, which is positive compared to what we thought may be the case, but we need to continue those conversations, and we have really good relationships in Newport with providers as well. So and that is down to our contracts and commissioning team who are really good at, over the long period of time, building up relationships with providers, so that it's not very it's not adversarial. So it can be an adversarial process, can be really challenging. For us, we need to ensure that they're delivering what we want them to be delivering for people, and getting feedback from people and carers is really important. Unpaid carers is really important as a part of that process. So quality assurance is something that I'll be looking at now that I've joined Newport. It's something that I'm really passionate about, having come from the inspectorate. So yeah, that's probably as much as I can say about that at the moment.
I appreciate that, and I think it's more of a comment rather than a question. I think it's a concern in some ways about if a care home was to close, to make sure that if we do have individuals affected, how we go in and support. And I know that's happened in the last few years, and it's about hopefully recognising, like in education, we know our schools inside out, we know our care homes inside out. It's similar to that. So if they are going to have an issue, we know in advance those are pressures, this is the likelihood, and have an A, B, and C plan option, which I know, as I said, has been activated before. And I think the one concern, I think a couple of years ago was, and I think it has somewhat improved, is when we are commissioning out services, it's more the fact of competing against other local authorities about who was basically the private providers of who's going to pay us more. And I know that was an issue. So sometimes when we really needed those spaces, it'd be us, Provide, Line of Grant, and others literally bidding against each other to get those spaces. And just, hopefully that market has improved somewhat in that relation, and that more regional working has kind of put a somewhat limit maybe on to that regard. It's not, I understand there's some type of profit making that needs to be made for staffing and things like that there, but not the excessive amounts. It's not a cash cow, so to speak. It is very much, service driven for individuals and their care needs, not a, nice little you know, going off with the yacht or whatever have you for the owners and stuff like that.
Do you have any other questions? Yeah.
Two questions really. You mentioned about the increase in requirements for the adult services. How are you going to manage those? And the other thing is organisational starters and leavers. You have more leavers than starters, so I can't see how you're going to reduce that requirement for the service.
Okay, so if I go to the organisational starters and leavers, you're right in terms of that we've had more leavers than starters, but I think the context is really important here. So across adult services, we've got approximately 450 staff. So if you think about that, we've had 4 more people leave than joined us. Actually, it's not a significant number, I would say. However, and we do actually, the other thing to say about that is that we do have, I suppose, very low in terms of actually our vacancy levels. So for social workers, we have, you know, very, I suppose, less than 10 vacancies at the moment in terms of our core staffing, which is a really positive position and much improved from a few years ago. So that's the first thing to say. I think where there are challenges, a little bit like in children's services, is the residential homes, is care staff where we have those vacancies. So I think in terms of the organisational staff and leads, it's nothing that I would be concerned about at this point, but it's good to keep an eye on that. And make sure that people's inductions are really good when they do join us, and make sure that people, what I have been, you know, since I joined Newport, I've been struck by the amount of people who've worked here for a very long time, and I think that's really positive. The retention is fantastic in adult services. So, and as I mentioned, you know, it really helps with those provider relationships and relationships with others if you've known people over a long period of time. In terms of demand on adult services, I think that's a much more challenging question to answer, and I think because it's across the board. So I suppose we've said about 10 years ago and about in the past, and there may have been times when actually it was relatively straightforward to solve in terms of you can move some staff out of one area and potentially into another area, and it's not that straightforward anymore because there's pressures, as we said, in the acute settings in the hospital. There's pressures in terms of reablement and on that service, there's pressure on the occupational therapists. I'm pleased to say that the waiting list has come down for them. So I think what we need to do is look at, are we deploying the resources we've got in the most effective and efficient way possible? So it's about roles and responsibilities. So thinking, you know, looking at what paperwork people are completing, how people are contacting us, how people are being prioritised. So we do prioritise people who are on our waiting list just to give that assurance. So if people need the same day response, they will get a same day response. So that there is some assurance around that. But what I'm concerned about is supporting staff through what feels like relentless pressure and unprecedented pressure all the time. And we've got a very good corporate offer in terms of the Viva support. You know, there's staff counselling available, there's the employee assistance programme, but there also has to be, I suppose, assurance. Staff have to feel, rightly so, that senior leaders are listening to the pressures and are looking at every possible way to address them. And some of that will be some service redesign in terms of some of the things that are in the plan, such as occupational therapy restructure. So can we look at, I suppose, pulling children and adults together, as it says in the plan? Would that free up some resources? But it's looking across the board at everything that we do to try to reduce, you know, is there any digital things that we can use? Are there apps that can take minutes in meetings? It's deploying everybody to what you need them to do in the most effective manner possible. So that is something that we're looking at going forward. But there's no easy answer to that, unfortunately.
One last question, Chair, and that is finance. How are we looking in regards to the budget? Are we?
Did you want to?
So yeah, I think I just
good or bad?
just to If I could just come in on that last question as well, I just wanted to reassure members that the Association of Directors in Wales regularly meet with Welsh Government advisors, and the demand versus the budget that we are allocated is constantly on that agenda, and the need for to raise awareness. We cannot continue to deal with the increased demand. Of course, you could all the innovative things that we're doing that's within our gift, but the facts of the matter are the financial envelope that we are receiving from Welsh Government is not sufficient for us to meet the demands of our population here in Newport and in other local authorities. This is not unique to us. So to come back to your question about where are we in relation to where were we? So if you think this is a midterm report, so at the end of the 6-month period, within the Social Services Directorate as a total, we were, we were looking quite good and certainly an improvement on previous years. So I think our overall forecast overspend at month 6 was about £250,000, which if you listen and to other local authorities around Wales, that was an excellent position to be in. We know how dynamic this area of work is. We know how quickly that can change. So even though that was the situation at month 6, that could very easily change by the end of the year, and I'm sure as committee members you'll be well aware of that.
Considering the budget that you have, that's a reasonably good figure after 6 months.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I think there's any more questions. So, Sam, anything?
So I've captured 2 recommendations, Chair. Thanks to Marshall's recommendation about receiving updates on assistive technology will be shared with committee as and when. And second recommendation about looking at complexities in Newport to ensure we're providing appropriate services for community needs. Is there anything anyone wants to add?
Thank you both.
I think let's go. Yeah, thank you. Lovely. Yeah.
Right. Prevention and inclusion.
So again, Chair, if it's okay with you, I'll hand over to Caroline to give us a brief overview of the service area.
Thanks very much. So I'm delighted to be here to provide a 6-month update on performance prevention and inclusion. So we're now into our 3rd year, which is brilliant. That we're really becoming embedded and established now in service area in its own right, not being the newbies on the block, so to speak. So really just a couple of high level points I just wanted to raise really. The service area absolutely remains focused on its core objective, which is to make sure that we are offering the right support, the right level of support to the right people at the right time. And that needs to be as early as possible if we're going to have an impact on preventing any escalation of their needs for support going down the line. So we're always thinking about how we can improve on that with our offer of support. Part of that is we're really thrilled now to have 2 council assets that have now been transferred from housing and community into professional inclusion. It's very early days when we think about how we're going to grow the offer from these 2 particular provisions, but we do have the care and always community centred coming over to our portfolio, and we are currently working on providing a range of programmes to be delivered from those community centred. So it's very much modelling what does the community need, what does the community want, what can we deliver. So there's something about not raising a real expectation, but really getting making new sense at the heart of the community that they're there to serve. So that's been a really good development. I'm really pleased to announce that we just warmly welcomed Amy Thomas and her team to this service area. So the biodirectory, violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. That is a regional work stream that has now just transferred from children's services to prevention and inclusion. That is a really nice bit actually, because we also have substance misuse regional work stream, and there are lots of overlaps and lots of similarities, and together collectively we can start to look much more intensely at how we are responding to both our statutory and legal responsibilities in those both agendas, not just regionally but absolutely from a local Newport perspective. We've seen our youth and play provision grow over the city. We had an absolutely fantastic summer period with all the summer activities that were on offer. And if you think about some of the wider cross-cutting agendas that we're trying to respond to, like cost of living, poverty, best starting life for children, you know, free activities for those communities go an awful long way to engaging and hearing from them and hearing what they need from support services, but also making a difference to them as a family and for those children. We had well over 1,000 individuals accessing our summer range of programs, which was just phenomenal. We particularly made a real good celebration of National Children's Day back in May. That was a really, really positive and successful event. We've not actually done that before in Newport, but it was an absolute celebration. It was led by children, everything was performed by children and delivered by children, and it was a real inspirational day of acknowledging the role and the contribution our children make to our communities and society. So that was a really wonderful celebration. I was particularly keen to, we really want to make sure prevention inclusion, we're not just a heading, a title, that actually we role model and advocate positively for inclusion. So National Children's Day is an example of that, where we had a group of children delivering in sign language and Makaton also. So again, that's really being meaningful and true to what we say we want to deliver. I think a main development for Scrutiny here today is one of the visions for me when I took on this role was to really improve and think about how we intervene much earlier and how we improve and strengthen our pathways across statutory services like adults and children. For me, I've long known and I've long advocated that there are an awful lot of missed opportunities that go into referrals that are going directly into the front door of statutory services. What we've now managed to do is we've been working on a pilot for the last 6 months on our technology using our working database at the moment, to set a dashboard where any referrals that are going to children's services that ordinarily do not meet their threshold or would not warrant a response because of their own capacity issues. What we want to do is make sure that those referrals are getting identified and transferred over to prevention and inclusion, and for our work then to start picking up some of those referrals. Those referrals do not necessarily mean we need to provide a full intervention, a program of 12 weeks intervention. It could simply be a conversation, it could simply be campaigning. If they get a contact, then they have an opportunity to have a conversation. That's all about that early intervention and building those early relationships with people to prevent things escalating. So that's going really well. We're still working on processes and staffing and capacity issues to make sure we get that absolutely right. Ideally then what we want to do is build that, grow that, so that we are helping to unlock statutory children's services front doors. They can focus on the children they need to be, and all the others are coming more directly into our work. That's a really promising development. I think that's probably the main headlines, but I'm very happy to take questions from anybody.
Are there any questions from the members online? Councillor Cleverly, any questions from you? Councillor Townsend?
No, not from me, David.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor
don't-
Jenkins?
I don't have a question, it's more of a comment. It's just great to see that children and their families in temporary accommodation are getting support now and offered activities. It's really good to hear. Thank you.
If I can just respond, no, again, that's something that we've worked in partnership with our colleagues in housing communities. We've long recognised there was a housing crisis, not just in Newport, but nationally as well. And we've become acutely aware of the growing numbers of families and children entering temporary accommodation and all the challenges that brings for them to run normal living. We felt we needed to do something to be more proactive, to bring some sense of normality for those children, whether it's a space to go and do their homework, or somewhere where as a family they can go and do some cooking and have a family meal. We're working really closely with our colleagues in housing on that, and that's going really well. Thank you for coming.
I've just got one question for you for bringing the members. On the page 9, you say maximise use of student grants, use existing core budgets. Is that not rather risky? You don't know what grants you're going to be picking up from next month. You'll know to next month what you've got. That's quite a broad statement there to say that you're going to maximise things when you might not have the budgets to do it.
I just think that for members to be assured that that would be on a short-term basis. It wouldn't be on a longer-term basis, for exactly the point that you have raised there, that we couldn't, even though I have already said in this meeting that some grants that we are receiving from Welsh Government are propping up our core services. You know, in this particular area, prevention and inclusion, if we do that, we would do it on a short-term basis, not on a rolling basis.
Okay. That's something that will need to come back to us, but we will need to monitor that to see whether that's actually working.
You're absolutely right, Chair. This is a risk to the service, but it's savings that we have to make, and it's an innovative way of making savings by transferring grants where applicable to grant funding.
As long as they're there.
But you're absolutely right.
Okay. Councillor Harvey, we'll start with you this time.
Thanks, Chair. I have the same concern as you. Can we even save 150? Is it? No. Yeah, 152 altogether. Given that I know you're 90% grant funded, and you're solely reliant on these grants coming down the line. If they don't come down the line, what happens? It really is a concern. Just a comment really for me, with first-hand knowledge of Allway Centre and the teams in Allway. Can't speak highly of them. Trev Williams is phenomenal. She makes things happen. Does that make sense? You know they should be happening, but Chev walks in and they happen. So, you know, the girl for me is worth a weight in gold, in all honesty. But just to give a little bit of a flavour of what's going on, because P and I are now in Allway Centre, we have a new picture in there, one thing or another. Myself in, because it's our ward, would also be opening a food pantry. So when the parents come in to use the youth service, instead of dropping the kids and going, they can then access the kitchen and they'll be taught how to make a sustainable meal, and but they can also access the pantry to get the ingredients. So it's the left hand working with the right hand, and it's sustainable because the produce will be in the kitchen, so that the people coming in don't have to spend any money to make the meal, but they will all go home with a hot meal for their children. And for me, that just is phenomenal. The way that's slotted into place like a jigsaw is unbelievable. It's working really well.
It's notable that the ward councillors in Allway, Councillor Debbie and Tim Harvey, have got hands-on experience, practical work and the work that they're doing. So I just want to note that as well. And thank the councillors.
You'll be very surprised, Chair. Next month would have been 12,000 meals donated and handed out from Always Centre, courtesy of Business and Community in County. It's phenomenal.
Councillor Watkins.
Page 4, Chair, objective 2, deliver an appropriate range of inclusive early intervention and prevention services to meet the needs of adults, children and young people. How are you going to do that?
Yeah, of course. So objective 2 is, as you rightly said, if you were to look at the action plan, there's a number of actions in there that we're working towards to deliver that objective. So a range of inclusive and early intervention preventative services. So we're talking about our youth service, we're talking about our Flying Start programme, our Families First programme. There's lots, and all of those are grant funded under the Children and Communities grant. So all of those programmes have a number of performance indicators attached to them. So we look at those programmes to make sure that they're doing exactly that, that we've got a wide range of preventative and early intervention services to meet the needs of the, the various communities. Some of those programmes are quite prescribed by Welsh Government. So for example, if you look at Flying Start, we have to provide childcare, we have to provide parenting advice, speech and language advice and enhanced health visiting. So some of them are quite prescribed and we don't have as much flexibility as we might like. For other programmes, for example, our Families First programme, we can be more flexible about meeting the needs within the various communities depending on what has been identified.
So how do you identify that early intervention needed?
So the way that that's identified, it isn't just down to social services, it's very much down to our working with our partners as well. So our partners in education, in the health service, police as well, all of those wide range of voluntary, anybody, and actually self-referral, families themselves can refer themselves in for this level of support, this prevention early intervention. So how we identify the needs of families within Newport are identified via a number of different routes, and they come into one place where they're coordinated, and then the intervention is then provided depending on what the need is.
That's what I wanted to hit, the coordination all into one place so you could deal with it.
Yes.
People could deal with it. That's the path which I wanted.
If I could just add to that, it's not so much that we identify early intervention, it's very much through being out there, being in the community, building those really positive relationships with resident children. Is actually they know who we are, they know where to seek help when they need it, the relationships they're building. So what we want to do then is that, so that is early intervention. So, and then as they need to talk to somebody or through our relationship, we identify that there are some support needs, there might be an unpaid carer, for example. We can start to have more considered and sophisticated conversations about, look, we can support you in this, we can signpost you to that, and then we tap into that preventative agenda by catching them early. So the relationship side of things is really important. In order to do that, we need to be out there in communities and be visible.
But people seem to be reluctant to come forward to think they want something, need support. What I wanted to know is how do you encourage them to contact the education or justice system or NCC or whatever? That's what I was trying to get.
Can I add, I suppose, a really good example of what has recently launched in Newport is with Best Start in Life, the antenatal support in the app that you just launched, so that women can access this app through their midwives, and it will actually give them links to antenatal classes, advice, support, asking those very difficult questions. That's a very, very recent launch in the last few weeks to improve that access to those women in our communities who often actually don't realise what's out there, and it's a way of actually making sure that they know what's out there. And some, many people don't actually realise that they need that support. It's actually in front of them, and by actually putting an app onto people's phones, it's the right generation who use apps that we can actually ensure that they get that additional access to that support that's out there.
Perhaps other services can actually look at that type of thing and use it and their services. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. One is questions. First one being about youth services and about is there likelihood of expansion? I know there has been expansion in the last couple of months as well as the last few years. It's just something that obviously is coming up, what to expect moving forward, but that also includes, is there any more scope for disability provision for those with like autism and things like that? Is something that residents are calling for, and it's something that they feel is not necessarily something that they can adhere to all the time because of the date changes, climate change, which has an effect on the child then because they're expecting consistency in certain scopes. So just wanted to hear if there's any scope within that. Thank you.
I think you're absolutely right to say that there has been quite a growth in our youth service in the last couple of years, and that's purely because it's come from a very different model into a new way of working, much more citywide now in terms of our offer. I think it's a really, really good point because I think it's fair to say we probably, based on our budget and our staffing capacity, we're at capacity. I don't think we've got any more in the bank, so to speak, that allows us to keep growing a youth club provision here, there, and everywhere. What we have got now is a good spread of youth clubs. We've actually now got a total of 11 across the city, which is a massive improvement from where we were 2 years ago. And in terms of our disabled provision, there's been absolutely total focus on Rihanna here. I'll probably refer to Rihanna in a second, but we now have a really, as part of the restructure, we've got a new approach and a new arrangement now fitting with our disabled children's team in children's services. And there was a whole preventative arm that sits within that, and complex play and complex youth support is also aligned within that. So we do have a number of play sessions that run across the city. There is also a complete focus on specific provision for those children with additional needs. Because what we want to do, again, going back to my point about making sure we're inclusive, is making sure that the offer and the support available is appropriate to the child in the child's age range, and so that we're not just putting everybody into one group because it's just easier to do. That is absolutely not our idea, and we've done a lot of work to sort that out. I'm going to refer to Rihanna. Is there anything you want to add in terms of the disability system?
Yeah, there's an ALN just club now which has been set up, which is actually mentioned spotlighted in the which has been really well attended and really well thought of. We actually had a meeting about it yesterday, so hoping to make sure that remains, because we've kind of been pulling sort of grant funding in various places to set that up. Like to another if we can, and then what's the do that with like one of the other services as well.
I add to that the recent opening at the information station, the hub for youth provision as well. So that's 30 to 55, but it's a drop in. So that's for young people to go 4 weeks a week.
Yeah.
And specifically within there, it's a really relaxed place to go. You specifically got a hub there for our refugees to go and do some learning, do that, and to take homework. So that learning support is there as well as your training, education. So the offer has really expanded over the last 2 years to the extent that our youth service was recently awarded its silver award, and it's now almost ready to achieve its gold as well. There's some outstanding support, outstanding provision that's there. And I'm really looking forward to the publication of our estimate report in December to just moving on to estimate as well.
I can just add one comment on the information station. Actually, it is. I'll report probably more on that in the end of the year because it's literally just gone live. We're kind of running a little bit out of date, haven't we?
Yeah.
But it has gone live, and actually in 2 weeks we've had 30 young people attend, of which 20 of those were new to the service and not known. So just having a city centre present, and go back to the point I was saying about we need to be out there, we need services out there and visible that people feel comfortable and confident to approach. And so that is phenomenal. And 20 new people, it just gives you an indication of what we could reach going forward if we can really grow that provision in the city centre.
It reminds me of the information shop that used to be on Commercial Street many years ago. So I started off youth volunteering at that point in time, and it was always the scope, before they changed it in the model of the library, that the fact you could just link in and basically no one else would see you, and it's the confidence to do that. Whereas the library kind of, I think, lost that rhythm a little bit, and it's just like, oh, am I going to be seen by so and so, and it was like that different dynamic. So it's positive in that regard, and good to see. It leads on to slightly the other question then in relation to integrating the work of P&I area within the local authority generally. Within strategies and that, and just about basic functions. I know, like when we were saying, it was a fantastic thing having like the young carers and youth academy attend the fair recently for the Winter Wonderland. But some parents were saying, is there going to be quiet hours and things like that there? So it's scope of just remembering all aspects of the work and whether or not that can be put in provision. So one side is doing something like a great, partnership of working with events, and said earlier about the scope of if there's, one part of the council, I said financial side, can we make sure that all of them are a bit more supportive in making sure that we are singing from the same hymn sheet? We're not all, one person being quite strong-handed here, but then one person being, let's support you, and it just doesn't make sense. And it needs to be that coordinated approach, and hopefully that would come from yourselves to hear that approach.
Absolutely. And again, that's something I've been an advocate for quite a while, very much about as a council, as one council, we are all working together and singing from the same page, as you say. I think we've made some positive headway. That's not to say we've got lots more work to do, without a doubt. We're working with very established systems and services that are set up in the way that they are. But it's all about, I suppose, if each head of service coming around the table and bringing that really innovative thinking, that kind of open to different ways of thinking. And I think we have got a really good group of head of services at the moment on that page. So, for example, I don't think the work I'm progressing with children's services in terms of the dashboard, we're working really closely with my family in adult services to really start to map out and look at all the different pathways for older people into services where we know there's lots of duplication. We know where some people are kind of rocking up at different entry points. How can we streamline that with adult services and make it far easier? Why are so many older people going to the GP when it's not a medical issue, it's a social issue? These are the things that we're aware of and that we're trying to tackle. So that's just within social services. These things I knew they weren't happening previously. Housing communities is a particular area, and education is a really strong area where we're working very, very closely with. And young carers is a good example of that, where we're having a meeting with Sarah Morgan and we want to look at how we can think about extending the reach of the service and identify some of these young carers. We know there are hundreds more out there, but we do not know them. Do they know about the support that's out there? It's just about making sure we get the messaging out there and promote the services in the best way we can. So there are really strong partners, but that's not to say, we work with Newport, say for Newport agenda, thinking about, antisocial behaviour that's going on in the city centre and how we can link up there. We know that there are issues around substance use and drunkards in the city. What can we do about that? How are we working together? So there are lots of linking up, and I think the key to that is having people who are open to different ways of working, not just keep doing the same thing that we've always done, because that's not necessarily the right way. It works in some places, but sometimes we need to think differently, particularly when we've got the financial climate that we have.
Just on that note, yesterday we had a flag raising ceremony, and we celebrated as a council and this is spreading the word among the council, White Ribbon Day, which is raising awareness of gender-based violence, of men perpetrating violence against women. And it wasn't just a flag raising ceremony, it is something that needs to be promoted, this awareness throughout the council itself, but throughout the city too. And yesterday, we as men took on that challenge, to challenge ourselves, to challenge myself, that violence against women is not acceptable in any form. And if we see other men in a situation like that, we should challenge those men as well. Newport City Council has been awarded a White Ribbon accreditation, and that's a great credit to the service and the officers. And as well as that, World Health Organization has awarded the city age-friendly status, which again is a great accolade rather, for the officers, but for the city itself. That we in Newport are recognised as a city that improves the quality of life for older people in as many ways. So I hope that helps to answer your question.
Mr. Deans.
Thank you, Chair. Caroline just correctly mentioned young carers, but I want to give credit to Steve Marshall, because last week we signed the Youth Carers Covenant, and it was the work that Councillor Steve Marshall undertook to actually make that happen, working closely with Bernardo's. And this is unique in Wales, that we have now made a commitment to support our young carers. And for me, my cabinet portfolio obviously covers education as well, and I sat and listened to our we brought young people in from our schools, and I sat and discussed them. What was apparent is that we've got a big piece of work to do, because the level of support in our schools was there. It was variable, and there were certain instances where I could see that support was outstanding, and I can also see how and why that's happened. So Caroline quite rightly said she spoke to Sarah. It's because I've already spoke to Sarah. This was last week. I'm meeting with Sarah on Friday, and I've got a plan of action I want to implement. I can see a way of ensuring that our young carers get a better support across all our schools. But it's the identification of those who are unknown, because how many of our children go to school and actually don't know they're a carer because they've grown up getting up and giving them their tablets, looking after their sister, whatever they're doing. That's a normal way of life, and what that impact of that is on learning is late into school, missed days, inability to do homework, outcomes can be really badly affected. And one young person said to me, I said, what do you think the impact on your life? I said, you're taking your GCSEs next year. Where, if you weren't taking your, if you didn't have to look after your sister because you miss whole days of schools, etc., what do you think the grades will be? And he said to me, I think I get A minuses, A. And I said, and what do you think you'll get at this point in time? He said, probably D's and E's. That for me is a challenge, and that's what I'm going to be taking on, because we actually have to address that. We have to give these young people every opportunity to achieve. It's their right, and we've got a duty to care to do that. And that's why I'm really pleased we've signed that Young Carers Covenant. And that's work that we've got to keep referring back to. We've got to keep looking at what are we doing to ensure these outcomes we can be. Because it's not a statutory responsibility of us as schools to actually measure. And I think it ought to be, as we do with our looked after children, as we do with children who are being excluded. We even need to focus more on young carers and make a difference.
I think on that side, and thank you for the team for allowing that to happen. And I think, you know, for me, as I said then, it's the fact it's a start rather than a finish.
Yeah.
It's building that side of things there, and it's great to know that things are happening straight away from it. And I think we're speaking to young people about some of the issues faced, and it's about working with partners and things like that as well, which is all part of the P&I. You know, ethos about working with others to see what we can do to support our residents, and that is just one scope. And I think, you know, it felt, and why I strove with it is the fact it just feels like, you know, in some ways it's forgotten about group of young people and people there. And sometimes unpaid carers are the same. It's just making sure that we do support them and have their backs where we can, but have acknowledgement of the issues, at least as counsellors and others. The fact that we understand what the issues are and what are the barriers, what is it that we can do to try and get around it. Have knowledge is one thing, and then making that power to make that change is another, isn't it? I think that that's some of the empowerment on that side. And I think we want.
Yeah. Just to reiterate what you're saying, I was a young carer. Yeah. From the age of 8, I know exactly what path these kids are walking. It's not fun. Yeah. You do feel isolated. You do feel, why me? Yeah. This is not fair. I've had a guts fault. You do feel like that. Yeah. But our governing bodies are also able. That's my point.
Yeah.
They should be. I'm the carer champion in my governing body in school, and I should be aware of all of those children and those who are not recognised as being carers. And I think if every governing body has one person designated, we can soon identify where all these kids have gone.
That's exactly my point.
Yeah.
Some schools, there's a very variable.
Yeah.
And there's work I can do.
Yeah.
Usually. And I intend to.
Yeah. Oh, I got no doubt about it.
And I'm sure that will reflect in future reports. Thank you. I think from that, and just a slightly different type of question, still about carers. I just want to know, is there anything that the officer would like to add about the track the bill that's come out of the report? I know that the local authority has put in obviously response to that, and as a local area, and I say local area as a region, we're actually, highlighted as on the ball, being about the RIF funding and things like that, and about the tapering. We're very much on the ball of understanding the implications and why we fought for what we fought for at that point in time, with Welsh Government. And I think it's just whether or not there's any responses, and also about the fact of basically assessments being undertaken. I think that was the main highlight from that report as well. And if officers are happy to advise us anything from that point, from what work has been done, obviously, because the report was done, within the time period, but also, if there's anything that I'd like to say about addressing moving forward.
So I think you mentioned, particularly in relation to the RIF funding there, so I can sort of say a bit about that. Again, you'd be aware. And again, this is not unique to Newport. RIF funding is across children's and adult services, and there is some posts within prevention and inclusion that are benefiting from that. That funding comes to an end in 2027. It was predated by ICF funding as we used to know it. It is propping up a lot of services, again, called services. We are lobbying Welsh Government at every opportunity to say that needs to continue. It's not just the social care side of things, it's funding a lot of health initiatives as well, which you no doubt be aware of. Personally, I think it will continue in some shape or form. It's the extent of that and whether that will be kept, and then there's some difficult decisions to be made. As a directorate, what we are planning to do in January, even though the funding is confirmed until 2027, from January 25 next year, we will be looking very carefully at what we are using that funding for, and trying to do some contingency planning and prioritisation. So if the worst case scenario does happen, we're starting to think about this at an early stage. So I hope that gives you some level of assurance.
So what is more fact is actually praise in a lot of ways, because it was the fact that we understood what the issues were and the implications, and a lot of the other areas in Wales had no clue what was coming up, and it was the, oh, hang on, what's this, when we highlighted it. So it's praised in that way. And just want to know, is there any kind of points from the report that we can action or have highlighted, such as the assessments for unpaid carers, to understand who they are, and basically making sure that we are making assessments? Because I think one of the points of the report was stating that a lot of local authorities are behind on assessments. They don't have the capacity to hold assessments. So it's just whether or not where we are, but also what have we acknowledged from the report in order to learn our lessons to move forward in that regard as well.
Well, we could certainly come back to you on
Yeah, I don't expect it to still any report, but it's just a
take
request.
that as an action and provide some feedback to Scrutiny.
Appreciate that, thank you. and it's just to make sure it's on the agenda and making sure that we do have that fully supported. Thank you. And my last one, which you'd be probably glad to hear, it's not a list of 20, is just basically within the cabinet members. I know you said bits and pieces have seen already, but just what yourselves politically see as challenges moving forward and what you're doing in order to try and fight the causes to speak, especially on the political side, when the officers have given what they said, and what you're doing with Welsh Government, WLGA and things like that, that you'd just like to advise us of essentially.
Can we just be a bit careful that it's just not a political committee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and you have collective responsibility as cabinet members to the leader as well.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that, Steve. I think it's all of us, as ever, it's finances. And quite simply, you quite rightly raised at the very outset, is the commentary on the reliance on grant funding and sustainability of grant funding. It's actually about always delivering effective services, always reaching out, and always considering the next challenge. We quite rightly raised in this meeting, we're looking at the new challenge example, a rapid understanding that we need to work with young carers. There'll always be those new challenges, but it's always reaching out, addressing those challenges and how we can better support those individuals. How can we always improve? And that's why it's excellent to come to you, go through our RAG ratings, look at our successes, but also look at where we're not achieving those outcomes that we want to, and understand the reasons why that is, and then working to improve. It's quite a simple answer, but I think that applies to all of us. That's what we're always looking to do.
Well, to that, thank you.
I'd just like to finish up the lead then by saying that it's a really important department that I was meant does a lot of good work. But my real concern for you is you're heavily reliant on grants from Welsh Government and from other places. And we talk about challenging times. I've been on this council 22 years. It's always been challenging, always. It's never been easy to find money and to do the things that we want to do. Can you give me some kind of assurance that if some of these grants do dry up, that you will be able to find other sources of income, even if you have to go back to the cabinet to get money agreed from other places, to be able to carry on the good work that you do?
Can I say that as a cabinet, we've been tasked by the leader to look at transformative change, how we can actually deliver services differently, generate an income, and actually sustain what we do, because we knew this year was going to be the most potentially going to be the year we see the greatest financial challenge. So already we started work on those transformative things we can actually do within each department, within each portfolio, how we can sustain that, create change and sustain delivery of services. And that is a challenge that was being thrown down as a gauntlet to us by our new Dimitri as our new leader when he came into local authority in that role. And it has been hard. He's certainly pushed us to come up with new ways of doing things, and you'll see those things delivering out as we go through the sort of budget process. There's stuff very much in the pipeline that I can't discuss at this point in time because they're still being thought through, but it's not something that we're not aware of. I can absolutely 100% assure you. We know it's going to be difficult, even with, we are going to hopefully get a better financial outcome than we originally anticipated. You can't guarantee that because there's going to be other pressures as well. A really good example is potentially what will national insurance costs increase look like for us. We've got to take account of those additional costs that will come into the local authority. So it's still going to be a challenge.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. If I could just a quick comment following that from your question, where I think should we be in that position where the Welsh Government start to come to it with reduced budget or their seats in some of those grants. It was something out that a couple of those programs, they are very, very big national programs. So, I would like to think if Welsh Government were going to make changes, that there would be a proper consultation period taken up so that we could plan appropriately. Internally, in terms of what we could do, you're right, literally 95% of it is grant funding. it will come back to what are the council priorities. What are the priorities for our cabinet that we want to think about? What are we most concerned about in terms of planning for communities and residents? And what is it that we want to do about that in the absence of any of that grant funding? So that's where I would take that, because there would need to be a cabinet steer on what is it that we're going to do here when we've got no money.
The thing that worries me most about certainly around consultations and things out there, that we do a consultation for the budget every year. And something that we know is really important and that we as a council may have to reduce. We put it out for consultation and you may get 5, 6, 10 responses on it. But then, you know, something like the 20-mile-an-hour limit causes a massive, because it impacts on more people. And I think that people out there aren't aware sometimes of how crucial some of these services are, and that, you know, otherwise they would have more to say about when there has to be reductions.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. I don't know how we resolve that. How do we get that out there so that people are aware? You know, you talk about the white ribbon thing earlier just now. Well, yeah, so you've done that, and that's important. But you know, if we had to make a cut in the youth service, when a youth service member goes, you know, people out there should be interested in that.
No, they're only interested.
If we have more kids who are utilising
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
they?
totally. Yeah. It's only when you hit the problem. Yeah.
And I've got to say, this P&I team really do go the extra mile. They think outside the box all the time. And I used to nickname Caroline the squirrel, because she would find stuff squirreled around everywhere and she'd bring it to the table. She's an incredibly good team in P&I,
I think
which we
it's
are lucky.
worth recognising, though, that they are the team or the department that's most at risk.
And they are.
Most at risk on the council.
Because it's not statutory services, it's
Yeah.
actually what you're doing to actually make
Yeah.
it.
And 95% of
Yeah.
that it's not a good place to be.
Yeah.
But as you rightly pointed out, Chair, that the service prevention and inclusion actually looks at understanding the stresses of family life, of life at, of an older person, and preventing them needing further care by early intervention.
Yeah.
And we know how important that is, and we will be fighting if the situation arises. To if ever there came a threat to the finances of this provision,
Yeah.
that we would fight.
Welsh Government are very stum at the moment. There's absolute silence to what the budget would look like. And I spent last weekend at the Welsh Labour conference, spoke to Rebecca Evans, etc. Stum. You want to push, you keep pointing and what's going to look like, etc. But the positive from that is we're not getting education on cuts to grants.
That's good.
So, and there would always be the education, nothing's
Right. I don't think there's any more questions. Sam?
I've got a couple of recommendations, Chair. I got the recommendation about committee being made aware of any issues regarding grant funding going forward. The recommendation to Councillor Watkins about exploring these grants and other services to support and awareness for our residents. And Councillor Marshall captured your point about further information on any points highlighted or to be actioned from that report. Can I just clarify what the report is for the minutes?
Yes, we'll track the bill. And it's care as well.
Yeah.
But we will be the copy. Copies like see that.
Is there anything?
Everybody happy?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I think we're going home now. Then we'll be back in a couple of
I was just going to say the same thing, yeah.
Okay, so the next report is on page 97. And it's the Scrutiny Advisor report. Sam, is this for you?
Yeah, do you want me to just read
Yes,
the
please.
Chair? So when we have our action sheet and our forward work programme to take today, our actions are quite a few completed now. We've got our site visit arranged next week to see the assistive technology. Not in Newport Park Market anymore, it is in the library. And that should be moving to libraries within these. We've got 2 complete actions from the head of children's services. We would have seen that information quite a while ago actually. And we've got some ongoing actions, but they tend to be more longer term actions, there's nothing to be concerned about. No changes in our forward work programme. Our next meeting will be the 10th of December for our education mid-year reports. And that is all from me, Jake.
Steve,
Thank you. Just a point or question. So I know in the past that we've been able to co-opt members on, and I'm just wondering, would there be a possibility, if it's anything in relation to young people, about Rowan Adairn, who would be a fantastic addition to the committee from experience, care experience, and deals a lot with young people. I think it would be a really fantastic addition to help us scrutinise alongside us.
Then you can pick up with the head of water standards discussion. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got no issues with being allowed to have experience to advise and guide us. That's what okay, I think that's probably it then, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all very much indeed.
Shall see
Thank
you
you,
all
Chair.
in half an hour.
Yeah, like that, wasn't it?
It does, yeah.